A broke man walked into the Monte Carlo casino with 4,000 borrowed pounds in his pocket. He wasn't a professional gambler, just a con man who sold fake patents with a silver tongue. But that night, in just 11 hours, he broke the bank 11 times in a row and cleaned out Europe's biggest casino. His name was Charles Wells, and he'd spent years calling himself an inventor. He'd only ever gotten one real patent in his life, a ship propeller speed governor back in 1868, and selling it earned him 5,000 francs. After that, he never built another working device, but he kept posing as an engineer anyway. For over 20 years, he never sold a single finished product, just designs that never left the drawing board. A musical jump rope, an underwater fishing torpedo, high-speed rail track designs, none of it ever became real. With convincing fake patents, detailed drawings, and a real talent for pitching, he could win anyone's trust. He targeted divorced wealthy women, retired officers looking to start businesses, and merchants with some savings. He'd show them the plans and the numbers, promise a 20% return, and disappear the moment he had the cash. By 1891, he'd swindled more people than anyone could count. He was hiding out under a fake name in a cramped London office just to stay afloat. His victims were closing in, his cover was about to blow, and arrest was right around the corner. He had one move left: take whatever money he had scammed and go bet it all in Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo was the biggest casino in Europe at the time, with 2,000 dealers and staff on hand. Every roulette table kept 100,000 francs in reserve chips, and the vault held millions in gold and cash. The casino knew the math was on their side. European roulette gave the house a built-in 2.7% edge, so over time, they always won. That's why they didn't mind if a player won big for a night. They'd even use it as advertising. They had a whole ritual for it. If a player cleaned out a table's reserve, that was called breaking the bank. The dealer would drape the table in black cloth, the orchestra would stop playing, and every eye in the room would turn to the winner. For the casino, all it took was restocking the chips the next day. The long-term math never changed. If anything, these stories just pulled in more gamblers. Casino management was confident the wheel was purely random. No one could win an entire reserve in one sitting. That's when Wells, with nowhere left to turn, walked through the casino doors. He sat down at a roulette table and traded his 4,000 pounds for about 100,000 francs in chips. At first, he just bet on red, black, and odd even money stuff. Small bets, wins and losses trading off, nothing that stood out. That went on for 20 minutes, and then something no one had ever seen happened. Wells started winning non-stop, hitting almost every single bet, 23 wins out of 30 spins. By midnight, he'd cleaned out the table's entire 100,000 franc reserve for the first time. The floor manager rushed to open the safe and bring out backup chips, but within an hour, Wells had won those too. The casino usually only saw 1 or 2 bank breaks a month. They'd never seen someone wipe out reserves back to back, and the staff started to panic. By the third bank break, they had to pull cash straight from the vault. 2 staffers wheeling a cart loaded with gold and cash up the marble stairs into the gaming hall. Wells never left his seat the whole time, and his bets had no clear pattern. Sometimes he'd bet the same color over and over, sometimes he'd double down on one number, then suddenly pull his chips back. The casino combed through his betting records afterward and couldn't find any sign of cheating. By 3 a.m., a crowd had packed in around his table. Players from every other table had gathered to watch. The orchestra in the main hall had to stop playing. They'd lost their whole audience. At 6 a.m., Wells broke the bank for the 11th time, having won 1,000,000 francs in 11 hours straight, a record for the biggest single-session win the casino had ever seen. After the dealer laid down the black cloth for the 11th time, Wells picked up his cane and strolled out of the casino. The next day, every major newspaper in Europe put his story on the front page, calling him the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo. But more than the 1,000,000 francs they'd lost, the casino was worried about something else. If Wells really had figured out a way to win consistently, their entire business model would collapse. They hired private detectives to tail him around the clock, watching where he went, who he met, how he lived, but they never found an accomplice or any cheating device. Reporters camped out at the tables, reviewing the wheel's spin records and interviewing the dealers on shift, but they couldn't find a pattern in his bets either. When Wells talked to a London newspaper, he said he had a system based on math, luck, and patience, but he wouldn't share the details. He claimed anyone could learn it, given enough time. The casino, the press, and gamblers everywhere were all suspicious, but nobody could prove him wrong. 4 months after his first big win, Wells came back to Monte Carlo, sat down at the same table, bought the same amount in chips, and broke the bank again. Truth is, the casino let him keep winning because the math made sense for them too. Every article about him brought in tens of thousands of new visitors, way more than the million francs he'd won. Instead of banning him, they put his photo on their promotional materials and mentioned his name every chance they got. Wells had become the best free advertising Monte Carlo ever had. But the casino still believed Wells had some kind of trick up his sleeve. The reason the detectives, reporters, and dealers couldn't catch him was that Wells actually had an engineering background. He figured a roulette wheel was just a machine, and machines always had small flaws. Weeks before he ever placed a big bet, Wells had been camping out at the casino with a notebook, watching how each wheel spun, tracking how often each number came up, looking for worn bearings, uneven pockets, or a slight tilt in the floor that might throw off the results. He never told anyone what he'd actually figured out. In January 1892, he went back to Monte Carlo a third time, lost 100,000 francs, and never set foot in the casino again. The money from his 2 big wins was gone before long, and around the same time, all his old fraud victims started catching up with him. So he made one last, reckless move, use his fame to run an even bigger investment scam. He commissioned a luxury yacht called the Royal Palace, running trips between England and France, and claimed he was building the biggest steamship company in Europe. He funded the whole thing with the million francs from Monte Carlo, and investors poured in money, which Wells just blew through again, leaving dozens of people with massive losses. At the end of 1892, French detectives arrested him, and he was later extradited to England to stand trial. The jury found him guilty on all 23 counts of fraud, and he got 8 years in prison. When Wells got out, he was broke, but he still had the gift of gab, so he took the name Ray and opened a small private bank to run another scam. He promised depositors 1% interest a day, 365% a year, basically the same trick as his old fake patents. His fame made people let their guard down, and 6,000 depositors put a combined 2 million francs into his bank, all of which he burned through again. In January 1912, French police arrested him one more time, and he got 5 years. And that was the end of Wells' story. The casino always knew Wells had some kind of system, but they never told the public the truth. Once the secret got out, the century-long legend that had been marketing the casino would vanish. And by then, the story had brought in way more visitors than the casino could have drawn on its own. For 130 years, nobody's settled the question of whether Wells beat the casino with careful calculation or just got incredibly lucky. The casino's official line has always been luck. Wells insisted until the day he died that he had his own winning method, but he never wrote a word of it down. This con man spent his whole life scamming thousands of investors with fake patents, and the only thing he ever actually invented that worked was the system that broke the bank 11 times in 11 hours. And the one successful invention of his life, he never told a single soul.